Before we begin, find yourself somewhere comfortable. Let your shoulders soften, your breathing slow, and your attention loosen its grip on the day. This is a story told at the pace of starlight, meant for quiet hours when the mind is allowed to wander without needing to arrive anywhere at all. If your thoughts drift, that is perfectly fine. The universe is very patient. On a warm afternoon in the summer of 1950, 4 men walked together toward lunch. There was nothing ceremonial about the moment, no audience, no sense that history was being made. Just a few scientists stepping away from their work, the desert sun hanging overhead, the day unfolding like any other. They were physicists, men whose minds were accustomed to vast numbers and invisible forces, to energies that could not be seen but only inferred. Their conversation was light at first, almost playful. They spoke about a cartoon they had seen, little green figures pilfering trash cans, the sort of image that makes you smile without thinking too hard about it. And yet, somewhere between the laughter and the footsteps on hot pavement, the conversation shifted. It drifted, as conversations sometimes do, toward the stars. One of the men paused, not physically, but inwardly. His mind began to move in that quiet way it often did, connecting ideas without effort, stacking probabilities like stones. The universe, he knew, was unimaginably old, billions of years old, old enough for stars to be born, burn brightly and fade away again, over and over, long before the Earth had even cooled. The galaxy they lived in held hundreds of billions of stars, many older than the Sun, many surrounded by planets. Not a few planets, but worlds upon worlds, drifting through darkness, circling their stars in steady silence. If even a small fraction of those worlds resembled Earth in the right ways, and if even a fraction of those developed life, and if even a fraction of that life learned to wonder, to build, to look outward, then something felt off. The numbers suggested abundance. They suggested crowds. They suggested a sky alive with signals, with evidence, with traces of long histories unfolding far beyond human reach. And yet the sky was quiet. The physicist looked up from his thoughts and asked a simple question, spoken almost casually, as though it were no more important than the lunch menu waiting ahead. "Where is everybody?" The question landed softly, but it did not bounce. It stayed there, suspended between them. No one answered because no one could. That moment would later be remembered as the birth of a puzzle that refuses to rest. Not because it is loud or dramatic, but because it is so quiet. A question that echoes not with sound, but with absence. When we look up at the night sky, we see light that has travelled for years, centuries, sometimes millions of years, just to reach our eyes. We see stars as they once were, not as they are now. We see a universe that has had more than enough time to do remarkable things, and yet, when we listen carefully, when we tune our instruments and our imaginations outward, we hear nothing that answers back. This silence is not the same as emptiness. Silence can be full. A forest at night is silent in this way, not because nothing is there, but because everything is listening. For a long time, the quiet felt comforting. Perhaps we were early, some thought. Perhaps intelligence was rare. Perhaps life itself was a miracle that had only happened once. But the longer the silence stretched on, the more unsettling it became. Because silence, when it persists, invites interpretation. Humans are very good at filling quiet spaces with meaning. When a phone does not ring, we wonder why. When a message goes unanswered, we invent stories. The universe, it turns out, is no different. Its silence presses gently on the mind, encouraging questions that do not demand answers right away, but do not let go either. It is important to linger here, at the beginning, before theories and explanations and careful logic enter the scene, because this question did not arise from fear. It arose from curiosity, from a sense of wonder that noticed a mismatch between what seemed possible and what appeared to be real. The stars did not feel hostile. They felt distant, indifferent, perhaps, but not threatening. Just very, very quiet. And in that quiet, humanity began to listen more carefully, not all at once, and not with urgency, but with patience. With the same patience we bring to the night when sleep does not come right away, and we lie still, waiting for thoughts to soften. Where is everybody? It is a question you can carry gently without needing to solve it. A question that does not rush. A question that allows the mind to drift, to imagine, to rest inside uncertainty. In the next part of our story, we will settle into that listening. We will turn our attention to the moments when humanity leaned closer to the sky, ears tilted toward the vastness, waiting to hear whether the silence would ever break. After that first quiet question settled into human thought, the universe did not answer right away. It simply remained as it was, vast and dark and unhurried, stars scattered like distant embers beneath an endless night. And so, slowly, patiently, humanity leaned in a little closer and began to listen. Listening to the sky is not like listening to another person. There is no voice, no rhythm of breath, no familiar cadence to hold on to. Instead, there is waiting. Long stretches of waiting broken only by the soft hum of instruments and the steady passage of time. Listening to the universe is an act of humility because it requires accepting that the response, if it comes at all, will arrive on its own schedule. As the decades passed, the tools grew more sensitive, antennas stretched wider, dishes grew deeper, and the human ear extended itself outward through machines that could detect whispers buried beneath oceans of noise. The night sky, once only a canvas of light, became something more intricate, more textured. Invisible waves flowed through space like a cosmic tide, carrying stories from distant stars, remnants of ancient explosions, echoes of processes older than memory. Among those waves, humanity searched for something specific, not beauty, not poetry, but intention, a signal that did not belong to nature's long, patient rhythms, something narrow and deliberate, repeating in a way that suggested thought rather than chance. This search was never hurried. It unfolded in quiet rooms filled with softly glowing screens, where days blurred into nights and nights into years. The people who listened learned to be comfortable with stillness. They learned that most of what arrives from the cosmos is silence layered upon silence, punctuated by familiar patterns that can be explained, categorized, and gently set aside. And yet, hope lingered. Not loud hope, not the kind that demands fulfillment, but a quieter hope, like standing at the edge of a calm lake at dawn, watching for ripples. If someone else existed out there, if another mind had ever looked up at its own sky and wondered the same thing, then perhaps that wondering had left a trace. For a long time, nothing seemed to answer back. The sky offered static and stellar noise, the steady pulse of known objects following their ancient routines. Stars lived and died. Galaxies spun slowly like massive wheels turning in deep time. Everything behaved as physics said it should, and still the silence remained. Then, one day, something unusual appeared. Just briefly, just long enough to be noticed, a signal rose above the background hum. It was narrow and strong, precisely the kind of thing listeners had imagined for years. It did not linger, it did not repeat. It arrived, announced itself without words, and vanished again into the dark. Those who saw it felt a familiar tightening in the chest, the kind that comes when something almost happens. The signal was given a simple name, an expression of surprise written down in haste, and then it became a mystery. Telescopes turned back toward the same patch of sky, listening again, waiting for the echo that never came. The universe, it seemed, had exhaled once and then fallen quiet again. Explanations emerged gently, as explanations tend to do. Perhaps it was a natural phenomenon, something rare but not meaningful in the way people hoped. Perhaps it was a coincidence, a brief alignment of circumstances that mimicked intention without containing it. Or perhaps it was exactly what it appeared to be, a fleeting greeting from somewhere unimaginably distant, lost as soon as it arrived. No one could be sure, and so the moment slipped into history, not as proof, but as possibility. Over time, the listening continued. The instruments grew quieter, more precise. The patience deepened. If the universe was speaking, it was doing so in a language that unfolded very slowly, one that required a willingness to wait without assurance. There was something almost meditative about this search. Hours spent watching lines scroll across screens, patterns rising and falling like waves against a shore. Most of them meant nothing. Some of them meant something else entirely. None of them, so far, carried the unmistakable signature of another thinking presence. And yet, the silence itself began to feel meaningful. Silence can be many things. It can be absence, but it can also be restraint. A forest at night is not empty simply because no one is speaking. It is quiet because everything is listening, everything aware of everything else. As humanity listened longer, that metaphor began to take shape without anyone quite realizing it. The universe felt less like an empty room and more like a dark landscape, where sound travelled far and caution was wise. Each unanswered moment added weight to the original question, not by amplifying it, but by deepening it. Where is everybody? Perhaps the better question, some began to wonder, was not why no one had spoken, but why anyone would. In a universe where distance turns every word into a long-term commitment, where a single signal takes years to arrive and years more to answer, silence might not be failure at all. It might be strategy. It might be patience taken to its furthest extreme. These thoughts did not arrive all at once. They drifted in slowly, like fog rolling across still water. No alarm bells rang. No conclusions were forced. There was simply the growing sense that listening by itself might not be enough to understand what was happening in the dark. And so, without fully realizing the weight of the shift, humanity did something quietly profound. After years of listening to an unresponsive sky, it began to speak. In the next chapter, we will follow that moment of a decision when curiosity turned outward into action, and the quiet night was answered not by the universe, but by us. After years of listening, of leaning into the quiet and finding only the slow breathing of the cosmos, something subtle shifted inside the human mind. The silence did not end, but our relationship with it changed. What had once felt like a question asked into darkness began to feel like a pause, a held breath, waiting for someone to speak first. And so gently, almost without ceremony, humanity decided to speak. It did not happen all at once. There was no single moment when the world gathered together and agreed to send its voice into the stars. Instead, it unfolded the way many human choices do, through curiosity and optimism, through small groups of people convinced that reaching outward was a natural extension of listening. If the universe was quiet, perhaps it was simply waiting. Perhaps it was polite. Perhaps no one had yet said hello in a way that could be heard. So we spoke. We spoke with machines shaped like bowls and arches, rooted to the earth like great metal stones, listening and transmitting at the same time. We shaped our voices into patterns of numbers and pulses, believing that mathematics, at least, might be shared across the vast differences between minds. Where language could fail, numbers might endure. The act itself was deeply human. To look into darkness and decide not to whisper, but to call out calmly, confidently, trusting that if someone was there, they would understand the gesture even if they did not understand the words. It was not an act of desperation, it was an act of hope, wrapped in patience. One message sent deliberately carried with it a portrait of who we thought we were. Not in poetry, not in stories, but in simple structures that could survive the long journey through space. Numbers counting upward, elements that formed our bodies, a rough outline of a human figure standing quietly against the background of the cosmos, a small indication of where we lived, which world we called home. It lasted only a few minutes, that transmission, and then it was gone, travelling outward at the speed of a light, slipping into the darkness between stars. Its destination lay so far away that no living human would ever know if it arrived. The message was not sent with expectation. It was sent with faith in time. Time, after all, is the true medium of cosmic conversation. Every word spoken to the universe must be willing to wait decades, centuries, even millennia before it can hope to be heard. In that sense, the message was less like a greeting and more like a stone dropped into deep water, creating ripples that might never return. Not long after, humanity sent something even quieter, even more fragile. Two small objects built not to speak but to drift were released from Earth and allowed to fall outward, away from the warmth of the sun and into interstellar night. Attached to them were records, not of science alone, but of life. Sounds of wind and rain, heartbeats, voices speaking greetings in many tongues, some already fading from Earth even as they were preserved. there was music too. Music chosen not to impress, but to reflect variety. Simple melodies and complex ones, carried not on air but etched into metal, waiting patiently for hands that might never touch them. These were not practical messages. The chances of them being found were so small they bordered on zero. But practicality was never the point. They were gestures, like carving a name into stone knowing it may weather away, but carving it anyway because leaving a trace feels meaningful. And all the while, without realizing it, humanity had been speaking continuously. Long before deliberate messages were sent, our planet had begun to glow in unfamiliar ways. Radio waves spilled outward, thin and fragile, carrying fragments of voices, music and static. They spread like an ever-expanding shell, a quiet bubble growing larger each year. At first those signals were weak and scattered, easily lost in the vastness, but they were there. A subtle change in the night marking the moment when Earth began to sound different from the worlds around it. Some believed this was harmless, that the universe was too large, the signals too faint for anyone to notice. Others felt a gentle unease, not sharp enough to become fear, but persistent enough to invite reflection. Speaking into darkness changes the darkness, even if only slightly. There is something intimate about revealing yourself when you do not know who might be listening. It is one thing to speak in a crowded room, another to speak in a forest at night. Your voice carries differently. You cannot see where it lands. Still the speaking continued, wrapped in optimism and curiosity. After all, silence had offered no guidance, and humanity has never been very good at remaining quiet when questions go unanswered. As these messages travelled outward, the night sky remained unchanged to the naked eye. The stars did not flicker in response. No reply arrived. The universe held its stillness. But somewhere beneath that stillness, something new had begun. A line had been crossed softly, almost unknowingly. The quiet relationship between humanity and the cosmos had shifted from listening alone to participation. In the next chapter, we will step away from the stars themselves and turn toward a single human life, shaped by silence, fear, and history, where an idea took root that would forever change how many people understood that quiet sky. The messages we sent into the dark did not come back to us, but ideas did. Ideas have a way of travelling inward, shaped not by distance, but by memory, by experience, by the quiet forces that form a human life, long before words are ever written. Far from the great radio dishes and listening rooms, in a world shaped by upheaval rather than starlight, a child grew up learning a different kind of silence. Not the peaceful silence of a night sky, but the careful silence of survival. The kind that teaches you when not to speak, when to hide what you think, when attention itself can be dangerous. He was born into a time when trust was fragile and visibility carried a cost. Around him, neighbours watched neighbours, words were weighed, and history pressed heavily on ordinary days. The world was not a place that rewarded openness. It was a place where revealing yourself too clearly could invite consequences you could not undo. As a boy, he watched authority reshape lives without warning. Ideas were treated as threats. People were reduced to symbols, and silence often was the only safe response. Yet even in that environment, imagination found its way in. Hidden books passed quietly from hand to hand, opened windows into other worlds. Stories where science and speculation met, where the universe was vast and indifferent, yet filled with possibility. In those pages, space was not comforting, but it was honest. It followed rules. Cold rules, perhaps, but consistent ones. That consistency mattered. Growing older, he learned to think in systems, in causes and effects that did not bend to wishful thinking. He studied engineering, logic, the structures that underpin complex machines. And alongside that, he carried the memory of a world where good intentions did not guarantee safety, where misunderstanding could escalate into catastrophe. When he began to write, he did not write to comfort. He wrote to explore what happens when fear is rational, when caution is not cowardice, but adaptation. He asked what the universe might look like if it followed the same unforgiving logic he had seen play out among humans. The silence of the cosmos, which others found puzzling, felt familiar to him. Not empty, careful. From that familiarity emerged a metaphor, simple and unsettling in equal measure. The universe as a forest at night, dense, ancient, full of unseen life moving between the trees. In such a forest, every sound carries, every snapped twig reveals position, every glow risks drawing eyes that were better left unaware. In this vision, civilizations are not explorers calling cheerfully across open plains. They're hunters, or perhaps prey, moving quietly, uncertain of who else might be listening. They do not announce themselves because announcing yourself is an invitation, and invitations cannot be revoked. The idea did not arise from hatred or malice. It arose from logic layered gently upon experience. If survival is the first requirement of any living system, and if resources are finite, and if intentions cannot be reliably known across vast distances and long delays, then caution becomes the only stable posture. Silence, then, is not loneliness, it is strategy. This way of seeing the universe reframed everything that had come before, the unanswered signals, the lack of visitors, the absence of grand structures blotting out stars. Perhaps nothing was missing. Perhaps everything was hidden. When this idea took shape in story form, it resonated far beyond its origins. Not because it was pleasant, but because it felt internally consistent. It did not require villains. It did not depend on cruelty for its own sake. It relied only on the mathematics of risk and the permanence of extinction. Once something is gone, it does not learn from its mistake. In this telling, the universe is not hostile, but it is unforgiving. It does not punish kindness, but it does not protect it either. Those who survive are not the loudest or the most hopeful, but the most careful. For listeners who drift here, this is not meant to alarm. There is no urgency in this thought, no call to action. Only an invitation to see the silence differently. What if the quiet sky is not waiting to be filled with voices, but already crowded with restraint? What if the darkness is not empty space, but a shared agreement, unspoken and ancient, to move gently and leave no trace? In the next chapter we will step more fully into this idea itself, laying it out slowly, patiently, and without judgment, to understand how a forest of stars might teach its inhabitants to whisper or not speak at all. To understand the forest fully, you have to slow down even more. This is not an idea meant to be grasped all at once. It unfolds the way darkness does at night, gradually, until your eyes adjust and shapes begin to emerge where there once seemed to be nothing at all. Imagine again that forest, not as something hostile, but as something ancient and deeply neutral. The trees are old. The ground is layered with fallen leaves, with stone, with the quiet memory of everything that has ever passed through. Movement happens, but rarely without care. In this forest, no one knows who else is there, and more importantly, no one can ever be certain what the others might become. This uncertainty is the heart of the idea. Not fear in the emotional sense, but uncertainty in the mathematical one. The kind that cannot be soothed by optimism, because it has no memory and no conscience. It simply exists. A civilization looks out into the darkness and detects another presence. A faint signal, perhaps. A pattern that does not belong to nature's slow breathing. Just enough to say, someone else is here. But that knowledge brings no clarity, only questions. Is the other peaceful or merely quiet for now? Is it curious, cautious, indifferent, or already afraid? And even if it is gentle today, what might it become tomorrow, or in 1,000 years, or in 1,000,000? Across the vast distances of space, time stretches thin. Messages take years to arrive, decades to answer. Between one exchange and the next, entire generations may pass. Cultures may change, values may erode or harden, intentions may drift like continents. Trust, which on Earth is built slowly through repeated presence and shared vulnerability, has no solid ground here. There is no eye contact, no shared silence, only delayed echoes of words sent long ago by voices that may no longer exist. This creates a chain of uncertainty that has no natural end. Not knowing what the other intends, not knowing what the other thinks you intend, not knowing what the other thinks you think they intend, each layer adding distance, not reducing it. And beneath all of this lies a single, unyielding fact. extinction is permanent. A civilization that guesses wrong even once does not get to revise its strategy. It does not get to apologize. It does not get to learn. So caution becomes more than preference. It becomes selection. Those who assume goodwill without certainty disappear. Those who hesitate too long vanish quietly. Those who reveal themselves too brightly draw attention they cannot undo. Over immense spans of time, this shapes the forest itself, not through intention, but through survival. The voices that remain are the ones that learned not to speak. There is another layer to this stillness, one that deepens the logic further. Technology does not grow like a tree, slowly adding rings at a predictable pace. It grows like water finding a crack in stone, suddenly, explosively, reshaping everything in moments that mean nothing to the universe, but everything to those who live through them. A civilization that seems harmless today may be unrecognizable tomorrow. A species that has just learned to send simple signals might, in a brief cosmic instant, learn to manipulate energies that unmake stars. There is no reliable way to predict when such leaps will happen, or what form they will take. From the perspective of the forest, weakness is not reassuring. It is temporary. And so, the logic tightens, not out of cruelty, but out of inevitability. If survival is the first requirement, and if futures cannot be known, then the safest assumption is that any unknown presence could one day become overwhelming. Silence, then, is not just politeness, it is armor. To reveal yourself is to remove that armor and stand exposed in a place where exposure has consequences that cannot be negotiated. There are no treaties enforced by distance measured in light years, no courts that operate on timescales longer than civilizations themselves, only cause and effect moving quietly through the dark. For humanity, this idea lands softly but firmly, like a stone placed on still water rather than thrown. We have been listening, we have been speaking, we have been hopeful. But hope, in this framework, is not protection. It is simply another signal. If the forest is real, then the silence we observed was not emptiness. It was restraint, a shared understanding, never spoken aloud, that the safest path is the quiet one. This does not mean destruction is constant or inevitable. It means it is possible. And in systems governed by survival, possibility is enough. You do not need to feel alarmed here. This is not a warning shouted into the night. It is a thought placed gently beside you, meant to be considered slowly, or not at all if sleep is already close. The universe does not rush. Neither should we. In the final chapter, we will turn back toward ourselves, toward what it means to live under a silent sky with this understanding, and how patience, humility, and not knowing might be the most natural responses of all. And so, we arrive not at an answer, but at a clearing. After wandering through questions, through silence, through the careful logic of a forest made of stars, we find ourselves back where we began, standing beneath the night sky. It looks the same as it always has, points of light scattered across darkness, steady and indifferent, ancient beyond easy comprehension. Nothing about the sky itself has changed. What has changed is the way we hold it. The idea of a quiet universe once felt like an absence, like a missing voice in a room that should have been full. Then it became a puzzle, then perhaps a warning. Now, as the thought settles, it becomes something gentler again, a reminder of how little we truly know and how patient the cosmos has always been. The forest metaphor does not demand belief. It does not require fear. It is one possible lens, shaped by logic and history, and the fragile awareness that survival matters to anything that survives. It may be right, it may be wrong. The universe does not rush to clarify. There are other possibilities, softer ones. Perhaps intelligence is rare, not because it is hunted, but because it is fragile. Perhaps life flickers briefly in many places and fades before it learns to speak across the void. Perhaps advanced civilizations turn inward, choosing depth over expansion, exploring inner landscapes rather than outer ones. Perhaps the silence is not caution, but completion. We cannot know yet. Our instruments are young. Our species is young. The bubble of our signals has travelled only a tiny distance compared to the width of the galaxy, like a small ripple spreading across a vast, still lake. It will take centuries before that ripple touches even a modest fraction of nearby stars. In cosmic terms, we have only just begun to whisper. There is a strange comfort in this perspective, not because it guarantees safety, but because it restores scale. The questions we ask feel enormous to us, but to the universe they unfold slowly, like water shaping stone over thousands of years. Whatever the truth may be, it will not reveal itself in haste. If the forest is real, then patience is wisdom. If it is not, patience is still wisdom. In both cases, humility fits naturally beneath the stars. Human history is filled with moments when we believed we stood at the center of everything, only to discover that we were part of something larger and quieter than we imagined. We once thought the sky revolved around us. Then we learned we revolved around a star. Then we learned our star was one among billions. Each realization felt destabilizing at first. Each one eventually became ordinary. Perhaps this question too will one day settle into something ordinary. A solved puzzle or a reframed one, or simply a mystery accepted without tension. Until then, we live as we always have, beneath the same sky that inspired the first question. We build, we learn, we speak, we listen. We send signals knowingly or not, and we wait. Waiting does not have to be anxious. It can be contemplative, like sitting beside a quiet ocean at night, aware that vast movements are happening beyond sight, yet feeling no need to command them. If somewhere out there another civilization is also listening, perhaps they too are lying beneath their own sky, wondering about the silence, imagining possibilities, inventing metaphors to explain what they cannot yet see. It is possible that countless minds across the galaxy have asked the same gentle question, each from their own small world. Where is everybody? And perhaps the answer, whatever it is, will unfold not through sudden revelation, but through steady understanding, layered slowly over generations. For now, the stars remain where they have always been, distant, beautiful, unconcerned with our timelines. If you find your thoughts drifting here, that is natural. The universe is wide enough to hold both curiosity and rest. You do not need to solve it tonight. The forest, if it exists, will still be there tomorrow. The silence too will remain patient. Let your breathing match that patience. Let the questions settle like stones at the bottom of clear water, visible but no longer disturbing the surface. The sky above you is ancient, and it is not in a hurry. Neither are you. And as the night deepens and the stars continue their quiet watch, you can allow yourself to drift, knowing that the mystery is not a threat, but a companion, one that has always been there, waiting softly in the dark. As the story comes to rest, there is nothing left to solve tonight. No final answer waiting just beyond the horizon. Only the quiet understanding that some questions are not meant to be chased, but lived alongside. The stars remain where they have always been, scattered patiently across the dark. They do not rush to explain themselves. They do not demand conclusions. They simply exist, and in their stillness, they offer permission for us to be still as well. If the universe is a forest, then tonight it is calm. No footsteps nearby, no sudden sounds, only the slow, steady presence of something vast, ancient, and unconcerned with our worries. You do not need to keep listening now. You do not need to keep wondering. The questions can wait. The sky will still be there tomorrow, and the night after that, and long after all of us are gone. For now, it is enough to rest beneath it. If this story brought you a sense of calm or quiet curiosity, or simply helped you slow down, you're warmly invited to stay connected. You can support this space by subscribing, by leaving a gentle like, or by sharing it with someone who might also need a peaceful place to land. Your presence here matters more than numbers ever could, and if you drifted in and out, if parts of the story slipped past unnoticed, that is not a failure. That is exactly how this was meant to be heard. The universe does not mind if you fall asleep, so let your breathing soften. Let the night carry you forward. The forest will keep its silence, and the stars will keep their watch. Good night.